Before we start, if you enjoy the story, please leave a like and check if you're subscribed. The forest breathed around him. Ethan Cross knelt beside a cluster of roots that pulsed with soft cyan light, his scanner recording the rhythmic bioluminescence in patterns he'd been tracking for 2 weeks. The air hung thick with moisture and the green scent of growing things, every surface slick from the previous night's rain. Overhead, the canopy filtered Cathara's dual suns into scattered coins of amber warmth. He adjusted the scanner's sensitivity and noted the timestamp. 3 months of this, mapping Volani territorial markers, documenting the forest's root network, trying to understand a culture that had shut humanity out after one too many broken treaties. Director Okoye had approved the study with the weary hope that real data might ease the colony's expansion tensions. Ethan had his doubts, but he'd learned that good science sometimes preceded good policy. The roots dimmed, then brightened in sequence, communication possibly. Or something simpler, moisture distribution, nutrient transfer. He needed more observations before drawing conclusions. A shadow crossed his peripheral vision. Ethan looked up into the canopy, scanning the interwoven branches 30 meters overhead. Nothing. A bird, maybe, or one of the gliding mammals he'd catalogued last week. He returned to his scanner, adjusting the spectral analysis settings. The blade touched his throat before he registered movement. Cold metal pressed just below his jaw, angled upward with precision that spoke of absolute confidence. Ethan froze, hands still on the scanner, pulse jumping against the weapon's edge. Stand slowly. The voice came from behind him, female and controlled. He raised his hands and rose, feeling the blade maintain perfect contact with his skin. His tactical training whispered through muscle memory, assess, identify exits, calculate odds, but none of that mattered with sharpened bone already at his carotid. He turned. She stood an arm's length away, blade steady in her 4-fingered grip. Magenta skin, deeper than the hollows he'd studied, shifted in tone across her forearms. Her eyes were amber pools with vertical pupils currently narrowed to slits. The elaborate construction of her braided hair framed a face that managed to be both alien and striking in its symmetry. A tail curved behind her, tip twitching in small, agitated movements. Volani, tracker by the economy of her stance and the worn quality of her gear. "You trespass in the deep forest," she said. Her accent shaped the human words carefully, each syllable deliberate. "Surveys are forbidden here. You know this." "I'm conducting ecological research," Ethan said, keeping his voice even. "Non-invasive observation. I have authorization from your director Okoye." Her tail lashed once. "Human authorization means nothing in Volani territory. This forest is sacred ground. Your people signed treaties promising to honor our boundaries." "I'm not here to violate treaties. I'm documenting the root systems to better understand how to exploit them." She moved closer, the blade never wavering. "I know about the mining survey. I know Helios Corporation waits for your data to plan their drilling sites." Ethan's stomach tightened. "That's not what this is." "Then what are you?" Her pupils dilated slightly, reading him in ways he didn't understand. "Scout? Spy? Another human who speaks of peace while preparing theft." "A scientist trying to prevent exactly what you're describing." He met her gaze, refusing to look away despite the weapon. "I left military service because I helped displace people who deserved better. I'm here because understanding your ecosystem might be the only thing that stops the colony from destroying it." She studied him in silence. Her skin tone shifted incrementally toward violet, and her tail coiled tight against her leg. He'd seen that in the cultural files, controlled emotion, decision-making in process. "You will come with me," she said finally. "Where?" "To face those whose land you violate." She produced a length of woven cord from her belt. "Hands." He extended his wrists. She bound them with efficient movements, the cord snug but not painful, then retrieved his scanner and clipped it to her own belt. When she gestured with the blade toward a gap in the undergrowth, he started walking. They moved through the forest in silence, her directions economical. A tap on his shoulder for turns, pressure on his arm to stop or proceed. She navigated the terrain with fluid grace. her bare feet finding purchase on wet roots and moss-covered stones that would have sent him sprawling. Plants seemed to lean toward her passage, and twice he heard soft chirping calls from the canopy that made her pause and tilt her head as if listening to language. The forest changed as they went deeper. The bioluminescence grew more pronounced, roots forming networks of pale blue and green light that pulsed in waves beneath the soil. Trees widened, their bark ridged with patterns that looked almost deliberate. The air cooled and sweetened, carrying scents he couldn't identify. "What's your name?" he asked after an hour of walking. She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice held less hostility, more curiosity. Why do humans always want names? Because talking to someone without knowing what to call them feels incomplete. Her tail uncurled slightly. "Cross. I know we have been watching you for 16 days. The admission caught him off guard. 16 days of observations, and he'd never suspected her presence. Either she was exceptional, or his field skills had degraded more than he'd thought. "You're very good at not being seen," he said. "You are very bad at seeing." Despite everything, he almost smiled. The forest opened into a clearing as the suns began their descent. Ethan stopped, breath catching in his throat. Structures grew from the living trees, not built but cultivated. Organic architecture spiraled upward through the trunks, platforms, and enclosed spaces woven into the canopy's framework. Rope bridges connected different levels, and bioluminescent vines traced pathways between dwellings. Villani moved through the settlement with the same fluid grace Saris possessed, some pausing to stare at him with undisguised hostility. Children peered from elevated platforms, their tails whipping in excitement. Adults emerged from doorways, conversations halting as word of his presence spread. An older Villani with silver-threaded braids descended from a central structure, her movements deliberate and her expression unreadable. "Saris," the elder said, her voice carrying authority that needed no volume, "you bring a human to our home." He was surveying the root nexus near the eastern boundary, Vezrin. Saris guided Ethan forward with pressure on his shoulder, alone, unarmed except for instruments. Vezrin's clouded eyes fixed on him with uncomfortable intensity. "What is your purpose here, human?" The gathered crowd grew quiet. Ethan felt the weight of their attention, the accumulated generations of broken promises and stolen land pressing down on this single moment. He could offer diplomatic language, carefully constructed explanations, the polished rhetoric of good intentions. Instead, he told the truth. "I came to study your forest because I thought understanding it might help prevent its destruction," he said. "But I also came because I've spent 5 years trying to atone for helping my government displace people who had every right to their home. I wanted to believe I could do better this time. I'm not sure I can." Vezrin's tail, which had been coiled at rest, moved in slow, considering arcs. She looked at Saris, some unspoken communication passing between them. "You will remain here for 3 cycles while we verify your words," Vezrin said. "Saris will serve as your keeper. If you prove false, you will answer for all the crimes your people have committed against ours." Saris's hand tightened briefly on his shoulder. When he glanced at her, her amber eyes held something he couldn't quite interpret. Doubt, perhaps, or the beginning of reluctant curiosity. She guided him toward a small structure at the settlement's edge, and he walked forward into captivity, wondering if honesty had been wisdom or simply the last mistake of a failed career. The guest structure was small but carefully made, walls woven from living vines that still grew green and fragrant. Ethan sat on a sleeping mat of woven grasses, watching dawnlight filter through the latticed ceiling. His wrists were unbound now, though Saris had made clear the boundaries he couldn't cross without escort. She arrived as the settlement stirred to life, carrying a bowl of something that steamed faintly in the cool morning air. "Grain porridge," she said, setting it beside him. "We adapt human nutritional needs when necessary." "You've held humans before?" "Traders, surveyors, thieves." She settled onto her heels just outside the doorway, tail curled around her ankles. All claimed peaceful intentions. Most lied. He ate slowly, the porridge bland but filling. She watched him with the same analytical focus he'd use observing animal behavior, and he wondered what conclusions she was drawing. You said you've been watching me for 16 days, he said. What did you learn? Her head tilted slightly. That you talk to yourself when you work. That you move carefully around the root clusters, never stepping directly on them. That you spent an entire afternoon photographing a nest of tree-dwelling rodents instead of continuing your survey route. They were raising young. The color patterns on the juveniles don't match any documented subspecies. So you delayed your military mission for curiosity about small animals. It's not a military mission, it's research. Research funded by your colony, which wants our land. Her tone remained neutral, but her tail tip flicked once. Tell me about human expansion. Why does your species always require more space? The question carried genuine interest beneath its edge. Ethan set the bowl aside and considered how to answer without sounding defensive. Population pressure, resource depletion on Earth, the belief that the universe is large enough for everyone to find a place. He met her gaze. And sometimes just because we can. Not every reason is noble. At least you don't pretend otherwise. She shifted her weight, drawing one knee up. What do humans know about the deep forest? Very little. Your people have restricted access for 30 years. The colony has aerial surveys and perimeter observations, but nothing detailed. And they want detailed information. Why? To assess mineral deposits, water sources, arable land. He kept his voice even. To determine what they can take without triggering ecological collapse. They cannot take anything without collapse. Her skin darkened toward violet. This forest is not separate resources. It is one living system. The roots you were scanning communicate through bioluminescent pulses. They share nutrients across kilometers. The trees, the soil organisms, the canopy dwellers, all connected. Remove any part and the whole suffers. Ethan leaned forward. How does the communication work? Chemical signals along the root network? Electrical impulses? Her expression shifted, surprise replacing some of her wariness. Both. And something else we have no human words for. The forest remembers. It learns. When my grandmother was young, a fire swept through the eastern valley. The roots changed their patterns, rerouting growth away from damaged areas. That change persists 3 generations later. Adaptive networked intelligence, he said quietly. We've theorized about such systems but never documented one this extensive. Your people would find that valuable. Some would want to study it, others would want to exploit it. He held her gaze. I want to understand it well enough to protect it. She studied him in silence, her tail unwinding slowly from her ankles. Before she could respond, a child's scream shattered the morning calm. They both moved instantly. Saris reached the central clearing first, Ethan close behind. A small Villani boy lay at the base of a tall tree, his left leg twisted at an angle that made Ethan's stomach clench. The child's mother knelt beside him, her skin pale with shock, while other villagers gathered in a worried circle. Vezrin emerged from her dwelling, but Saris was already kneeling beside the boy, speaking softly in their own language. The child whimpered, tears streaking his magenta cheeks. Ethan pushed through the crowd. Let me see. Saris's head snapped toward him, her expression hardening. You are not permitted. I have medical training, field trauma care. He knelt opposite her, assessing the injury without touching. Compound fracture, tibia visible through torn skin. The boy was going into shock. If that bone isn't set and the wound cleaned, infection will spread within hours. Do you have antibiotics? Surgical equipment? We have healers, Vezrin said coldly. I'm not questioning their skill. Ethan looked up at the elder. But I can help right now. Let me. The boy's mother spoke rapidly in Villani, her voice breaking. Saris translated without prompting. She asks if you can truly help her son. Yes, but I need clean water, cloth for bandaging, and something to immobilize the leg. Straight branches, leather straps. Saris's tail coiled tight, her pupils dilating. She looked at Vezrin, waiting. The elder's expression remained unreadable for a long moment, then she gave a single sharp nod. Bring what he requires, Vezrin said. The next 30 minutes became a blur of focused movement. Ethan worked with the supplies they brought, cleaning the wound with boiled water, carefully realigning the bone, while Saris held the boy steady and whispered reassurance in his ear. Her hands were gentle but firm, and she never flinched at the child's cries. He splinted the leg, using techniques drilled into him during combat medicine training, wrapping the makeshift cast with strips of clean fabric. When he finished, the boy had stopped screaming, his breathing steadier, though his skin remained pale pink with pain and exhaustion. "The bone should heal if he keeps weight off it for 6 weeks," Ethan said, sitting back on his heels. His hands trembled slightly with adrenaline fade. "Watch for fever or red streaking around the wound. If either appears, the infection is spreading and you'll need stronger intervention than I can provide here." The mother touched his shoulder briefly, her 4 fingers warm through his shirt, and spoke words he didn't understand but recognized as gratitude. Cirrus guided him back to his quarters as the crowd dispersed. Neither spoke until they reached the small structure. "That was skillfully done," she said quietly. "I've set a lot of broken bones." He sat heavily on the sleeping mat, exhaustion catching up, usually in worse conditions than this. "On other worlds, other species. Humans mostly, but the principles don't change much." He looked up at her. "Your people have sophisticated ecological knowledge, but limited surgical medicine. Why?" Her tail moved in slow figure eights. "We heal differently than you. Our bodies resist infection naturally, and our bones knit faster. We have never needed the interventions humans require." She paused. "You saved that child without asking for anything in return." He was hurt, that's reason enough. Something shifted in her expression, the hard edge of suspicion softening into something more complex. She moved into the doorway's shade and settled across from him, her posture less guarded than before. "Tell me about the world you helped evacuate," she said, "the one that drives you still." So he told her. Kepler 442b, the indigenous settlements, the corporate mining interest, the military deployment presented as peacekeeping. How he'd believed the official narratives until he watched families herded onto transport ships, their homes bulldozed behind them. How he'd filed reports documenting the violations and watched them disappear into bureaucratic silence. "I thought following orders absolved responsibility," he said. "I learned otherwise." "And yet you came to another frontier world, another indigenous people facing human expansion." Her amber eyes held his. "Why here? Why not refuse entirely?" "Because refusing means I have no influence, no chance to do it differently." He spread his hands. "Maybe that's naive. Maybe I'm just repeating my mistakes with better intentions. Or maybe you are the first human to understand what you truly owe." She reached into a pouch at her belt and withdrew his scanner, holding it out to him. "Vezrin has granted you limited freedom to continue your research under my supervision. She believes your actions with the child speak louder than your words." Ethan took the scanner, their fingers brushing briefly. Her skin was warmer than he expected, smooth and finely textured. She didn't pull away immediately. "Tomorrow I will show you the root network's primary nodes," she said. "You wish to understand our forest, I will teach you." That evening, as Cathara's suns set in tandem and the bioluminescence brightened throughout the settlement, Cirrus returned with rations and sat with him outside his quarters. They spoke of small things, the forest's seasonal patterns, human colony life, the differences in how their species processed sound and light. When she rose to leave, her tail brushed against his arm, the contact fleeting but unmistakably deliberate. He watched her disappear into the luminous dusk and wondered what barriers they were both beginning to cross. 3 kilometers away, beneath the colony's administrative center, a secure server received an encrypted burst transmission. Mining equipment had been loaded onto transport shuttles. Drilling would commence in 72 hours, not the 3 months officially scheduled. The message sat unread in Ethan's abandoned field equipment, waiting for someone to retrieve it. Dawn found them moving through the deep forest, Cirrus leading Ethan along paths invisible to his eyes. She navigated by instinct, bare feet silent on moss, while he followed in heavier boots. "Here," she said, stopping beside a massive tree whose roots spread like arterial branches. "Watch." She knelt and pressed both palms against a root cluster. Bioluminescence rippled outward from her touch, blue-green pulses traveling along the network in expanding circles. "You're triggering a response," he said, kneeling beside her. "I am speaking." She lifted one hand and the pulses slowed. The forest knows me, knows my family going back generations. Can I try? She hesitated, then nodded. He placed his hands where hers had been, feeling subtle warmth beneath his palms. Nothing happened. He adjusted pressure, waited. Then, faint, barely perceptible, a flicker of pale light beneath his left palm. Sirius's sharp intake of breath told him she saw it too. The pulse was weak, tentative, but real. "The forest is curious about you," she said softly. "That is unusual." They spent the morning documenting the root network's nodes, Ethan's scanner recording what Sirius explained, the forest's memory encoded in growth patterns, nutrients flowing to injured areas, seasonal communication variations. She shared knowledge her people had guarded for generations. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked as they rested beside a stream. "Because you see the forest as alive rather than resources." She drew patterns in the damp earth. "And because if your people understood what they would destroy, perhaps some would choose differently." "Some would, others wouldn't care." "Then we change who has power." Her amber eyes held his. "Your director Okoye, you believe he is reasonable?" "He's trapped between conscience and corporate pressure, but if he had proof of ecological collapse, he'd have political cover to resist." A sharp whistle cut through the forest. Sirius's head snapped up, her whole body tensing. She stood in one fluid motion, already moving toward the settlement. They reached the village to find Vesrin waiting with Tavik, whose skin was dark with agitation, tail lashing violently. "Your equipment," Vesrin said to Ethan. "Tavik retrieved it." Tavik thrust a black case toward him, his field communicator. Ethan's stomach dropped as he opened it and scrolled through messages. Dr. Nakamura's encrypted transmission was 3 days old. His hands went cold. "What does it say?" Saris asked. "Helios mining. Drilling begins in 72 hours. They're targeting the Eastern Valley directly over the primary root nexus." Silence fell. Saris's skin shifted to deep violet, pupils contracting to slits. "You knew," she said quietly, "this entire time." "No, this message arrived after you captured me. The official schedule was 3 months out." "Convenient." Tavik's hand moved to his blade. "The human maps are sacred sites, and now his people come to desecrate them." "I didn't know," Ethan said, looking at Saris. "You have to believe me." Her tail had gone rigid. Vesrin, permission to verify his claim. The elder's clouded eyes fixed on Ethan. "Take him to the deep caves. Hold him there until we know truth from lies." 2 warriors bound his wrists. Ethan kept his eyes on Saris. She wouldn't look at him. The limestone caves were cool and dark, walls traced with bioluminescent patterns matching the root network above. The warriors secured him to a pillar and left. Ethan studied the light patterns. The pulse sequences matched his route maps perfectly. The entire forest was built on this foundation, a living superstructure anchored in stone. Hours passed. He'd nearly dozed when footsteps echoed in the tunnel. Sirius emerged from shadow, carrying water and dried fruit. She set them beside him without meeting his eyes. "I should not be here," she said. "Then why are you?" "Because I want to believe you." Her tail coiled in agitated loops. "Because every instinct tells me you are different, but history teaches me that humans lie convincingly." "What would convince you?" She finally looked at him. "Take me to the mining site, show me proof of what they plan, help me gather evidence your director cannot ignore." "Saris, if Vesrin finds out, I am choosing to trust you over my elder's command." Her voice hardened. "Do not make me regret it." She cut his bonds. He rubbed circulation back into his wrists while she produced his scanner. "The mining site is 15 kilometers northwest," he said. "We can reach it by dawn if we move fast." "Then we move now." They traveled through darkness, the forest's bioluminescence providing just enough light. Saris set a punishing pace, and Ethan pushed himself to match it, tactical training returning in muscle memory. They reached the mining camp's perimeter as Kethara's first sun breached the horizon. Through the trees, Ethan saw heavy equipment positioned over the root nexus. He activated his scanner. The readings confirmed his worst fears. The drilling trajectory would pierce straight through the network's central node. 72 hours after they drill, the entire eastern network collapses, he said quietly. Within a week, it spreads west. Within a month, complete ecosystem failure across 300 square kilometers. Your people will destroy everything. Her voice was barely audible. For what? Rare earth elements worth billions. He saved the data to his scanner's secure partition. But this proves environmental treaty violations. If we can get this to Okoye, movement in his peripheral vision. He grabbed Saris's arm and pulled her down behind a fallen log as 2 security personnel walked past, rifles ready. They waited in frozen silence, Saris's shoulder pressed against his. When the patrol moved on, neither immediately pulled away. "We need to leave now," she whispered, her face close enough that he could see fine patterns in her skin, the way her pupils dilated. But his hand was still on her arm, and her tail had curved around to rest against his leg, and something in the adrenaline and proximity broke through the distance they'd maintained. She kissed him. It was brief, almost tentative, her lips softer than he expected, her breath warm with spice. When she pulled back, her skin had shifted to pale rose, her expression startled. "We should," she began. Shouts erupted from the mining camp. Flashlight beams swept the tree line. "Run," Ethan said. They crashed through undergrowth, Saris leading while security personnel crashed behind them. Commands echoed, weapons clicked ready. A shot cracked through the canopy. Bark exploded beside Ethan's head. Saris grabbed his hand and pulled him down a steep embankment. They slid on loose soil until hitting level ground in a narrow ravine. She pressed him flat against rock, her body covering his, breathing harsh against his ear. Footsteps and voices passed overhead. Searchlight beams swept the ravine's edge but didn't descend. They waited until silence returned. Eventually, Saris shifted back, her hand still gripping his. "They will report this," she said. "Both our peoples will know we were together." "We cannot go back, not yet." "Where then?" Her expression hardened with decision. "To finish what we started, to make this matter." They emerged from the ravine as dawn fully broke and began the journey back to confront both their worlds with truth neither wanted to accept. They returned to the Villani settlement near midday, the forest alive with agitated whispers. Warriors emerged from the canopy as Saris and Ethan approached, weapons drawn, their skin darkened with hostility. Vezrin waited in the central clearing, Tavik beside her with barely contained fury. "You defied my command," the elder said to Saris. Her voice carried no anger, only profound disappointment. "You freed the prisoner and left our people vulnerable." "I freed him to gather truth." Saris stepped forward, drawing the scanner from her belt. "Vezrin, what we found?" "What you found is irrelevant if it came through betrayal of trust." Vezrin's clouded eyes fixed on her. "You are my successor. The community looks to you for wisdom. Instead, you chose a human over your elder's judgment." Saris's skin paled to rose, her tail coiling tight. Ethan watched the weight settle on her shoulders, the burden of disappointing someone she revered, of fracturing the very unity she'd been raised to protect. "I chose truth," Saris said quietly, "even when it meant disobeying you, even when it might cost me everything." She activated the scanner and projected the data into the air between them. The holographic display showed the root network in glowing blue lines, the mining site marked in red, the cascade failure spreading outward in accelerating waves. Vezrin studied the projection in silence. Other Villani gathered close, murmuring as they recognized their sacred forest dying in simulation. 72 hours after drilling begins, the eastern network collapses, Saris explained. 1 month later, complete ecosystem failure. Our forest, our home, our history, gone. Tavik's hand gripped his blade. "Then we attack now, destroy their equipment before they can use it." "And bring their military down on us," Ethan said. "Helios has legal permits, however corrupt the process. If you strike first, the colony will respond with overwhelming force." "So we do nothing?" Tavik's skin darkened to near purple. "Watch them poison our land because human law protects their theft?" "No." Ethan pulled his own communicator from his pocket. "We use their law against them. This data proves environmental treaty violations that even corporate lawyers can't dismiss. If we get it to Director Okoye publicly, he'll be forced to act." Vezrin's expression remained unreadable. "You ask us to trust human systems that have failed us repeatedly." I'm asking you to let me try. Ethan met her gaze. If I fail, you can still choose violence. But if I succeed, you'll have legal protection and I'll have destroyed my career testifying against my own people's interests. That's the price I'm willing to pay. Why? Vezran asked. What do you gain from this sacrifice? Ethan glanced at Saris, whose amber eyes held his with an intensity that made his chest tighten. The chance to do something right, to prove not all humans deserve your distrust. Vezran was silent for a long moment. Her tail moved in slow, considering patterns. Finally she spoke. Saris will accompany you, so will Tavik and 3 warriors. Her voice hardened. If this is treachery, they will ensure you do not survive it. Understood. They reached the colony's administrative center as afternoon shadows lengthened. The building rose from cleared land like a monument to human permanence, concrete and steel against the organic architecture of the Villani settlement they'd left behind. Director Okoye's office was on the 3rd floor. Ethan walked in without announcement, Saris and the Villani warriors at his back. The secretary's protest died when she saw armed aliens in the hallway. Okoye stood behind his desk, his broad frame tensing. Dr. Cross, I've had reports you've gone native. I've gone honest. Ethan set the scanner on the desk. Helios Mining accelerated their timeline without proper environmental impact assessment. They're drilling into a networked root system that will trigger cascading ecological collapse. That's their claim, Okoye said, gesturing to the Villani. Why should I accept it over corporate engineering reports? Because I have data. Ethan activated the projection. Geological surveys, biological network mapping, predictive models showing total biosphere failure within 30 days of drilling, all of it documented to academic standards that will hold up in interstellar court. Okoye studied the display, his expression carefully neutral. Even if this is accurate, Helios has legal permits. I can't simply revoke them without cause. Environmental Protection Act, Article 7, Dr. Nakamura said from the doorway. She held a data tablet, her face flushed with determination. Projects causing irreversible ecological damage to indigenous territories require full environmental review, regardless of existing permits. I've submitted formal complaints to the Colonial Oversight Committee. Yuki, Okoye's voice carried warning, you're risking your position. I'm doing my job. She moved to stand beside Ethan. We're supposed to be scientists, Director, not enablers of environmental destruction. The door opened again. Garen Holt entered, his security uniform crisp, his expression cold. Director Okoye, I have reports of an armed alien presence in this facility. I'm authorized to remove them by force if necessary. Tavik's hand moved to his blade. The Villani warriors shifted into defensive positions. Stand down, Okoye said sharply. All of you. He circled his desk, studying the projection from multiple angles. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man making a decision that would define his legacy. Mr. Holt, as of this moment, all Helios mining operations are suspended pending full environmental review. He tapped his communicator. Security, I need a team to the Eastern Valley. No drilling equipment is to be activated under any circumstances. Holt's jaw tightened. You're overstepping your authority, Director. Helios Corporation will answer to the Colonial Oversight Committee for treaty violations. Okoye's gaze hardened. If they want to fight this in court, they're welcome to try, but they won't drill on my watch without proper clearance. The security chief left without another word, rage evident in every movement. Okoye turned to Saris. I can suspend operations, but I can't guarantee permanent protection. You'll need legal sovereignty over the deep forest. That requires negotiation. Then we negotiate, Saris said. The next 3 days blurred together, meetings with colonial administrators, Villani elders, environmental scientists, and legal advisors. Ethan found himself translating not just language, but worldviews, explaining Villani symbiosis with the forest to skeptical bureaucrats and human legal frameworks to suspicious warriors. Saris matched him hour for hour, her sharp intelligence cutting through political maneuvering with questions that forced both sides to confront uncomfortable truths. They worked late into the nights, arguing over boundary definitions and resource-sharing protocols, finding compromises that left no one entirely satisfied, but offered both peoples breathing room. On the fourth evening, they stood together in the administrative building's observation deck, watching Cathara's sun set over the forest canopy. "We did it," Ethan said quietly. "Legal sovereignty for Vallani territory, shared environmental oversight, human settlement restricted to the northern corridor. We created a paper treaty." Ceres's tail moved in slow figure eights. "Whether both peoples honor it remains to be seen." "You don't trust it will hold?" "I trust that you believe in it." She turned to face him. "That will have to be enough for now." Vezrin had requested their presence at the settlement the following morning. When they arrived, the entire community had gathered. The elder stood before a ceremonial fire, its smoke rising through the canopy. "Ethan Cross," Vezrin said in formal tones, "you have proven yourself through action, not words. You have sacrificed your standing among your own people to protect ours. By our oldest tradition, I name you kin by choice, the first human to receive this honor." She pressed her palm to his forehead, then to his chest. The gathered Vallani echoed the gesture in unison, a wave of acceptance that brought unexpected heat to his eyes. "Ceres," Vezrin continued, "your heart chose before your mind could doubt. You were right to trust him. May that wisdom guide you both." The elder stepped back, leaving them standing together before the community. Ceres's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his. Later, they walked through the bioluminescent forest to the place where they'd first met. The roots pulsed with soft light beneath their feet. "The colony has offered me a permanent liaison position," Ethan said, "but accepting means I won't fully belong to either world anymore." "Perhaps that is exactly where you need to be." Ceres knelt beside a root cluster, pressing her palm down. The forest responded with rippling light. She gestured for him to join her. He placed his hand beside hers. This time the response came immediately, blue-green pulses spreading from his touch, intertwining with hers in patterns that seemed almost joyful. "The forest knows you now," she said softly. "It has accepted you as I have." He turned toward her, and she met him halfway. The kiss was deeper this time, unhurried, full of promise rather than desperation. Her skin warmed beneath his touch, her tail curling around his waist in an embrace that felt like belonging. When they finally pulled apart, her expression held something he'd never seen before, unguarded hope. "This will not be easy," she said. "Both our peoples will question this. Some will never accept it." "I know." He brushed a strand of her braided hair back from her face. "But we've already proven that understanding is possible. Maybe that's enough." They sat together as night deepened and the forest sang its bioluminescent songs around them. Two beings from different worlds, choosing connection over division, building something new in the space between. Above them, Cathara's moons rose in tandem, casting silver light through the canopy, and for the first time since arriving on this frontier planet, Ethan felt like he'd finally come home.